November 2020, day 20. And tonight, what I want to talk into, just for my MOvember video, is to tell you all a little bit about John Lee through my eyes. John Lee will be tomorrow in 11 hours running an online webinar with some guys in the room and some guys online, uh, where John's going to be talking about anger and rage as one of the many subjects he can talk about. The book the most recent book of John's is The Anger Solution on Anger. But the classic book that I still try and keep a copy of in my bookshelf is Facing the Fire, Experiencing and Expressing Anger Appropriately, John Lee. You know, this book really changed my life. So many books change your life, but I remember in early recovery, in relational trauma, really unconscious, didn't know where it was coming from, and this book came into my life, and some of the techniques in this book really helped me how to express anger physically and emotionally without hurting anyone. And I dare say, you know, when you read through here and look at the detour technique and the detour method John's got in here, it's just been able to refine those concepts over the years. John has written, you need to look up his biography, but it's over, I think, 25 books, a whole bunch of variety of subjects, but they're generally books from the heart about men's work and men's lives, whether it be about relationships. I mean, some here I've got. One of my other favorites of John's, other than The Flying Boy, would be At My Father's Wedding, Reclaiming Our True Masculinity. John wrote The Flying Boy, and The Flying Boy put him on the map about nearly avoidance in relationship, and that put John in the company of some great men of the 80s and 90s. Robert Bly, who was a mentor of John's, Sam Keane, James Hillman, Michael Mead. Those guys started, you know, coming together, and you can hear all those men on the Minnesota Men's Conference YouTube page. It's just, that is a treasure trove of men coming together. And it was a time of real hunger. And we were doing it in Australia. Some of the guys will be in the group tomorrow. We used to meet and read fairy stories. We bought drums. We started banging. We had men's retreats. We were trying to sort of reclaim masculinity. A lot of us came from absent and distant fathers. A book of John's I love is Breaking the Mother-Son Dynamic, for men that grew up in fatherless homes or grew up very enmeshed with their mother. One of John's books on the fiction book is When Buddha Met Bubba. John's from Alabama. He's a Texas man, and it's sort of a great sort of spiritual book on rednecks and God. Courting a Woman's Soul. I've got a good book on John's on writing. But like I said, Flying Boy. I usually have a copy of Flying Boy. I give them away so regularly. And I think last time I was over there with John, he gave me Flying Boy, and I read it on the plane again on the way home. John is someone who I've had counseling with. I go to Texas to play music. I used to anyway. It's sort of in a different season now. And I would do intensives with John, and it was just spending time with an elder man who was wiser than me. And I really got a lot of refathering from John. The risks that they took, to just speak into men's lives, for another man to be talking to men about anger and how to express it, non-violently and non-domestically violent. It was a real risk, and we needed to hear it, and it was a strong voice. And when John would come out here in the 90s, and he drew a lot of crowds, men and women. He was, in that era when John Bradshaw would come out here, and we were hungry, I suppose, in Australia for this work, and for that I'm truly grateful. So I don't imagine anyone's going to see this video and join the podcast tomorrow. I'll see if I can get John we'll try and record it, and that way maybe that'll be a way for other people to benefit from listening from this. I do these videos for MOvember, which is about men's health, and I focus on mental health and rage and anger and domestic violence, something that I grew up in. My mother was a rageaholic, and my father didn't deal with that very well. And he would have his own troubles with anger, but my mother was a very explosive, violent woman when she was younger. She's mellowed in her older age. But some of the memories I have are horrific, and then she would be hospitalised and I wouldn't see it for ages. My father wouldn't really cope with that. He couldn't speak to us about it. He would live in a constant sort of vigilance about her attacks, and he was one of his defence mechanisms was always to be on edge and grumpy. And I really have, that's part of my inheritance if I'm not careful. You know, if I get the Holts, I just become an unpleasant person in the house. You know, ornaments aren't safe. And I don't like living that way. I sort of see my father in me sometimes and have to practice a lot of mindful self-compassion. So tonight I thought, what can I read of John's? There's so many things. We're going to talk about anger tomorrow, so I won't do that. And I might even I might sort of throw out there an old anger tape I did of one of John's techniques. But I wanted to talk about fathering. And I'm just going to pull into the chapter in this book, which is Fathers Who Taught Us Not to Grieve, Give or Receive. And I'm going to read the intro and then a few fathering types, and then that'll do us for tonight. Remember watching your dad shave? Perhaps you put on some of his thick white cream all over your face, and then with the smooth side of the comb sliced it off as he removed his whiskers, as well as your doubts about whose boy you really were. Now you look in the mirror, or you watch the way you talk to your kids, your dog, your wife, or your lover, and you still see whose boy you are. The patterns that we share with our fathers and the patterns we develop in reaction to theirs are often our only connection to them. If Dad drank Jack Daniel's whiskey twice a day, we take a couple of pulls on a Jim Beam bottle. We won't drink the same brand because that would be admitting he knew which was better. If Dad raged, then we rage. We feel a little closer to him than if we were to stay stoic and silent. If Dad's first love was his work, we take our job to the full-time. We take our job as a full-time mistress and wonder if Dad is watching from the grave as we work ourselves into an early one. Many sons share their father's patterns. Others purposely develop opposite thoughts and behaviours that can be used to get back at Pop for not performing the role of father adequately enough to suit the son. Little acts of rebellion show our resentment. Dad wears his hair short and is clean shaven. The son wears his hair long and sports a full beard. Bigger ones, if Dad was obsessive about money, the son creates a carefree lifestyle of throwing his money away and lives out of his father's worst fear, running out of money. Some men's fathers were so successful that the sons create a life where they consciously or unconsciously never quite succeed. Other sons who watch their fathers fail make sure they themselves never succeed by sabotaging their efforts so that Dad won't feel so defeated and shamed by his son's success. This son fears that if his father were to feel less a man than his son, he might like his son even less. But more likely the son is so pissed off at his father that he doesn't want to give his dad the satisfaction of seeing him succeed because he might sit back one day and on a lunch break with his buddies at the plant and claim credit for his son's accomplishments. Dad didn't get his financial life in order, neither does the son. Pop couldn't make a relationship work, neither can the son. Two peas in a pod, opposites at work. Dad was a construction worker, the son becomes a lawyer. Dad was an alcoholic, the son uses drugs and becomes a preacher. Or becomes a preacher. Dad yelled and screamed when he was angry, and the son holds his anger in and lets it ooze out in passive-aggressive ways. The desire for a connection with the father is further indicated in the way we choose to father our children based on the unconscious selection of the dysfunctional fathering styles we saw and imitated or reacted to. What follows are a number of different styles of fathering with which most men can identify. You may have absorbed only one style because this was the predominant way of your father fathered you. Chances are, though, you may recognize several. Since most fathers are a complex composition of their own fathers, uncles, grandfathers, and other important men in their past. The first fathering style is the man who would be king. This dad believed that since he worked hard all day for the real king, money, when he returned home his children and wife should act as his loyal subjects. Don't bother, Daddy, he's working hard for us. Says not the queen but the head servant. This father ruled his kingdom from a lazy boy recliner, sometimes granting pardons, but more often performing the role of principal punisher and executioner. He was the old wait till your father gets home dad. What he said was the law of the land because he owned the roof over your head. My dad had an overdeveloped attachment to his roof. He talked about his roof a lot and referred to it constantly when I dared question the king's decree for me. This is my house. You live under my roof. As long as you are under this roof, you do as you're told. When you get your own roof, you can do whatever you want to. But while you're under my roof, you'll do what I say when I say it. Damn, I thought to myself, I can't wait to get my own roof. The second style is a critical father. This father is full of negative criticism, frustration, and anger. No one could ever do anything right enough or on time enough to please him. He'd find a flaw in every thought, word, or deed. You can do better than that, can't you? What's wrong with you? Are you stupid? You'll never amount to anything. If I've shown you once, I've shown you 1,000 times. Get out of the way. I might as well do it myself. Can't you do anything right? His perfectionism and criticism pricked us and him every day. The passive father gave over all his duties, responsibilities, and power to the mother, the children, the boss, the society, the government, or some combination of these. Truly a pawn, he was moved by some greater will than his own. He didn't interact, interrupt, intercede, or show any interest. He was there, but not really. Occasionally he'd take a risk and offer a suggestion or a comment or provide some defense of himself or us, only to be beaten down or ignored. He silently crawled into books, booze, or TV and grew too fond of his garden or study, while his son grew up hating passivity and any kind, whether in men, women, or his own children. And the absentee father, much like the passive dad, he wasn't there for his son. He disappeared at dawn, wouldn't return till late at night. He might be encountered once at the refrigerator on the night both of you got hungry at the same time. You may have bumped into him as you both stumbled in the dark. The meeting was cordial, though slightly cool, and by the next morning you weren't sure if you'd really had run into him or it had just been a nightmare. This dad wasn't there for the ball games or the recitals you played in. He wasn't at your graduation. He was too busy. He wasn't there to tell you about your penis. Mum had to do that. He wasn't there to tell you about sex. Mum couldn't do that. Hell, he wasn't there emotionally when he helped conceive you, and he wasn't there when you were born. These fathering styles wound the son. The son assimilates these styles and either reproduces or rebels against them. The son raised by an absentee father may smother his son or daughter and be unable to let his child grow up. The passive father might raise a son who becomes so active in politics, bureaucracy, work, relationships that he can't slow down and let his wife or co-workers take their fair share of responsibility for making things happen. The passively raised son may become the man who would be king kind of father, almost as if to show dad how a real despot would manage things. More likely, though, the passively raised son will find himself acting like his father in ways he hated as a child and hates to see in himself, but feels powerless to change. The critical father produces a son who sees himself as never being good enough or worthy of love, success or time, attention, praise or tenderness. He keeps working and waiting for someone to tell him he's good enough at last, to take it easy and not to push too hard. He finds his main talent lies in observing that his wife, children, employees, friends and relatives are doing wrong. He waits for someone to tell him they're proud of him, but when they do, he can't hear it or just doesn't count as much. It just doesn't count as much as if it would have come from his dad, if his dad had said it and meant it when he was 7 or 10 or 14. He might allow himself to be criticized by bosses, wives, friends. He might even let people he doesn't know cut him to pieces, believing they're doing it for his own good or because they love him. The father who would be king usually raises a son who says the same things his father said to him about rules and obedience. The word is law, and he thinks he knows everything. There, standing in the mirror today, is a man shaving his father's face, a man who would rather be right than happy. There stands a man yelling at his kids in a way that surprises and confuses him, because as a boy he said he'd never do this if he ever had kids. Or there you sit in your lazy boy recliner letting the family run itself, or perhaps you are more like me and worked hard to be the opposite of everything Dad was externally, only to run smack into him again and again in really deep ways. My own healing process has needed lots of time, lots of work, and lots of acceptance of the many sides of me and my father that I have wanted to deny. It has also taken a while to heal some of the wounds I receive and to forgive myself for some of the same wounds I've inflicted. but recognizing your father's style of parenting, becoming conscious of the patterns you share with your father, or the ways in which you have made yourself purposely different, is a first step in finding your father, separating from him, and reclaiming your life as your own. So that's a little bit from John Lee's At My Father's Wedding, Reclaiming Our True Masculinity. Again, John will be talking tomorrow, pretty well based on these two books, The Anger Solution and Facing the Fire. But I know John, once he starts talking with a group of men, it's just a delight. If you can in your life, if you really have trouble connecting with men, reach out, ring Men's Line, find a male counselor. I remember my early counselors were women, and that was great. That was so helpful. But when I needed to talk about my dad, I moved on to a male therapist, and I've got his picture on the wall up there behind me. He became a boss of mine, John Falcon, and I dearly was appreciative of him being there for me when I was doing the beginnings of this work, reading these books, starting in my first and early men's groups. So that's probably enough for me tonight. It's MOvember. The Mo's coming in. It's itchy tonight. If I was ever going to shave it off, it'd be today, but not for MOvember. I'll push forward. And I look forward to making another video tomorrow night. So be gentle with your heart. I'll talk to you then.